Hi everyone, Ashleigh here, just dropping in right at the start to tell you a couple of things. First off, this episode is even later than we said it would be, for which we can only apologise. We all have lives outside the podcast, and in the run-up to Yuletide there's a lot of planning, lots of moving parts and things to go wrong, which, well, they have. I won't bore you with the details, but again, we're really sorry for the delay, and we'll be back on schedule with our next episode coming on December 15th. Thanks very much, and now, on with the show!
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of What the Trans?
What the trans? Hello.
I'm with Ashleigh.
Hello!
And Flint.
Aye aye.
And I'm Alex. How are you two both doing?
Trial by fire.
I'm doing all right. I've been eating nothing but pizza the last couple of days.
That's the dream.
Yeah, well, you say that. I'm almost sick of it now, somehow. Because, so here's the thing, right? We spotted this really silly thing on, like, Just Eat or one of those, like, ordering apps. There was a local place near mine that had, accidentally or not, I don't know, put one of their meal deals as buy one, get one free.
Oh.
So we spent 20 quid, which is the cost of the meal deal, and then got 2 meal deals.
Nice.
Which meant that we ended up with 4 pizzas and 2 garlic breads with chips and 2 extra large garlic sauces. And it was great. We felt like we'd hacked the system.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly.
And other than that, I've been doing good. I finally saw Wicked. I saw the Green films.
Talking of pizza and how expensive it is sometimes, I think I remember I watched a video where they, for the price of 2 pizzas, they could get 2 people to Italy on a very cheap ticket, buy a pizza from Italy, and then fly back home again for the same price.
London prices, man, they'll fucking have me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also saw the Wicked films.
Yeah.
They're good. There was parts that were very fun. Parts, obviously no film's perfect. I think that honestly, it's a really fun watch. It's a chill time for the most part. I dig it. I just really wanted them to kiss. They could have just kissed. They could have just said that they say I love you to each other. Just let them kiss. Maybe I'm wrong for thinking that lesbians would be the best option here. Polyamorous lesbians, a hinge relationship, like it would work, but whatever. That's fine. I'm living in a fantasy world. I understand that I was never going to be able to really get that from this film, but you know, they really go hard for it though. They really are very like as close to it. Like they're explicit. They say I love you to each other. It's very cute. But yeah, so me and my friends were watching it like, let's go lesbians! It was great.
Oh, exactly. That reminds me of when I was watching Star Wars: The Force Awakens. You get like Finn and Poe from the movies, and the actors were really pushing for them to be a gay couple. Space boyfriends. Yes, and I was all for it. I was like, yes, this is perfect. Yeah. And then Disney just never did it.
Yeah.
And then I was reminded of my sorrow about that when I watched it at the Royal Albert Hall last weekend. Cause
the only kind of queer subtext / wanting something to be queer and saying like, just take it one step further. The only example of that I've got is, and you might find this funny, but I will walk you through my reasoning, is the Fast and the Furious film franchise. Because they're making...
Here.
Yeah, same.
They are making a lot of very, very weird.
Yes.
Well, no, it's not that weird.
It's not weird, but it's very queer.
It's about a queer polyamorous relationship.
Yes.
Made by a group of people that don't know what one of those is.
Yes.
And it's hilarious.
This is found
right?
family for hyper-masculine men. Go off. I am so here for this take. Fully on board with it. 100%. Yes, agreed. That's what I thought when I started watching them and getting into them. I was like, oh, okay. This is just bros for the bros, polycule, but make it platonic. But like, it's all there, you know? Yeah.
So when the
Yeah,
last
yeah.
one
Still
came
a
out,
deleted
Fast 10, when Fast 10 came out, which features Jason Momoa playing a deliciously camp character, by the way, which just adds more fuel to the fire. So my friends, my big gay group of people who gather here and watch Fast and Furious movies, all went to watch it at the cinema. I was either busy or didn't want to go to the cinema or whatever. The point is, they all went and I didn't. But apparently, so they were, you know, not on the front row, but there was this gaggle of queer people who kept like whooping and cheering everything that happened, and this, you know, group of hyper masculine men trying to watch this film like it's fucking art or something. And they're just wondering if this, you know, big boisterous group of queer people has wandered into the wrong film.
Yeah. No, I
So,
love that. There's
Yeah.
like, there's something about it that's very, like, it reminds me of wrestling. The reason why I love wrestling is because it's so fucking queer. And obviously it's got its faults, right? But that's drag for hypermasculine men.
Yep.
It's another form of art plus gender equals performance of story and self, and I think that's very fucking cool. So yeah, like I also love this reading of Fast and Furious. I'm very here for this reading of Fast and Furious. Anything is gay if you think about it for long enough.
Exactly. All clothes are gender neutral if you stop being a little bitch about it.
Yeah, if you got the confidence.
Yeah,
Speaking of
you
fun-
can work it, girl.
Yeah. Speaking of Fast
Right.
and Furious, how about this very quick update?
Obviously, we're also recording this a few days after Trans Day of Remembrance.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing did folks go to their own ones? I know I went to one in Durham, and then I went to a really cool gig that I want to talk briefly about. But did anyone get up to anything for Trans Day of Remembrance?
So I went, yes, obviously went out to the vigil in Sackville Gardens. In years gone by, I would have volunteered to read the names, but I didn't do that this time. When I got home, and over the next sort of couple of days with all the mud that was coming off my power wheelchair's tyres, it was like I brought most of Sackville Gardens home with me. But the service itself was very nice, very respectful. They used to do it inside like a heated tent, and that was lovely, but kind of being outside in the cold feels more appropriate somehow. I don't know.
I know what you mean.
It brings in the miserableness.
Yeah, I guess it kind of helps you focus, really. Or, I mean, that's the case with me anyway. Anything to try and help me stay awake, because I get drowsy quite a lot. But yes, it was very good, and it was good to hold space, and we just kind of came home and had a hot chocolate and warmed up and, hugged each other and went to bed. So, yeah, it was very, very chilled and somber evening.
Nice. I dig that.
Yeah. I think mine in London was sort of, I think I've learnt a few things from my first one. So as I was also got a bit too cold on my one, really. It was like minus 3 degrees.
Yeah, you got to wrap up.
Yeah, it was my mistake from going straight from work. But aside from that, it was the one I went to was because there was 2 of them. I went to one of the ones at Translegal Clinic. Christina went to the one in Soho Gardens. The Translegal Clinic one was all right. And it sounds like the Soho one went quite successfully as well.
Good.
I want to highlight a little, a really cool gig that was on. Not on Trans Day of Remembrance, it was on the weekend of it. This event has been put on before. It's called Transstock, and I'm pretty sure there was one for Trans Pride. There was another one for Trans Day of Remembrance, and it's really cool. And there's so many vigils, and I'm really glad for that. I am really happy for that there is a space, that's throughout the country. These pockets of community that are formed, and the one that I went to in Durham was beautiful because there was not that many of us, but there was a lot of tea lights out on the ground, just kind of like a firework laid out on the floor. It was beautiful, and we just kind of sat there and read out the names, and I helped try and keep the candles lit. But trans talk is something different, and I really, really loved it. The fact that in response to Trans Day of Remembrance, there was a yes, let's do remembrance, and let's do it loud, let's do it proud, let's talk about some of the more difficult things. Let's you know, in between acts they were taking these moments, and also for some of the acts there were poets, there were performers, there was a folk artist, there was a really cool band, a couple of bands, and it was great. It was really, really good to see that kind of like, I guess like community that was not it felt like the wake after the funeral, but in a more fun sense, if that makes sense. You know, if you have a wake after a funeral, and sometimes it gets a bit sort of like jolly because people are enjoying the time, reconnecting with people and reminiscing and things like that. It felt similar to that, but I don't want to say it felt like a funeral, because it wasn't. It was more joyous than that, but there was still that appropriate space. We all knew why we were there. Shout out to Jade Mia Broadhead for really cinching the whole thing together. She's also, I think we've spoke about her before. She was playing at a Pride that I covered years back, and is in a band called Dinky Passetti. And there was amazing artists there. I've forgotten the name of the poet. There was an amazing poet who I will make sure is tagged in the description, or will be mentioned in the description. And was doing amazing poetry. One in particular was called Flag Shagger, and it was fucking phenomenal. And to top it all off, there was this band called Bitch Finder General, who were magnificent, fucking magnificent. They were so good, avant-garde, weird, rocky, in your face, queer, loud as fuck about it. It was fucking beautiful. There was it's so good, and it's sardonic, and it's like acidic, but in the way that you need, in the way that a good bleach wash on a pair of jeans is. Like, it's just I loved it so much, and it was so refreshing to see that kind of take on a Trans Day Remembrance of event. And I really hope that they just go from strength to strength, because it was a lot of really cool people putting on a lot of really cool, amazing talent, and really needed when a lot of the other options were a couple of queer events where it wasn't going to really be centered, and ones where it was like, you know, the reason is to be there and be silent and be very, very much in that mournful space. And it's like there's different ways to mourn, and I really love the way that was brought there. And love to all the people involved in organising that. Love to the venue for putting it on. It's a community owned venue in Newcastle called the Globe. We love it. Just I needed to shout that out because it's beautiful.
Awesome. Well, Bitch Finder General, which I've just made a note of, because absolutely, as soon as they surface, we'll be like, hey, check out this band, pod fans. Jolly good. All right, so what's next before we get into the news? Alex.
So just to ease us into the news a bit, it's just a very quick story on the Lib Dem story last episode with Legenda quotas. So basically those quotas have now been dropped. So Legenda quotas are no longer there, but the quotas on ethnic minorities and disabled people have remained, and at the moment they're still waiting on the election results to actually be announced because they stopped it. So the story's developing, and we'll let you know what's happening later on.
So we ready for a little venture out?
Let's do it.
You ready to hop a pond?
Pond hopping, we're hopping across the pond. How bad could it be?
Now listen, if you think the only pond we're gonna hop across is the Atlantic, then fasten your seatbelts please, as we go past not just the Atlantic, but the Pacific too. Pond hopping, we're hopping across 2 ponds. Yeah. So we're going down to New Zealand for a titillating aperitif for the main meal later, and by titillating I of course mean stomach churning, so sorry for the turbulence. The New Zealand government has banned puberty blockers for young trans people, and that's not all. They directly cite Cass Review as part of the reasons for this poxy so-called quote-unquote precaution. And, on top of that, just to twist the knife, it's directly due to the Pathways Puberty Blockers trial that is currently starting here in the UK, but more on that later. In specific, the statement made by Health Minister Simeon Brown says new patients seeking treatment for gender dysphoria or incongruence can no longer be prescribed gonadotropin-releasing hormone analogues, which is puberty blockers, pending, and this is the specific bit, pending the completion of the United Kingdom's clinical trial on their use in this context. Now, this is not only deeply shocking, but one of the stranger parts of this is the New Zealand announcement came before the protocol for the pathways was even released. As our writer Sammy put it, either there was a leak to the New Zealand government or the relevant New Zealand officials were callous enough to tie trans kids' healthcare to a project that wasn't even off the ground. Seriously though, they can pretend that this is just a normal thing to do since there is research happening, but I feel the need to point out the obvious that it is not normal. By this logic, all heart disease treatment, many cancer treatments, and pretty much most medical treatments that you could come across would have to be stopped because research is the lifeblood of scientific method and is happening in the background all the time. We should always be finding better ways to treat people while still using the best we have to offer, but you cannot cure the human condition despite their blatant attempt at trying. So shame on you for falling for our government's sarcastic scam. Yeah, this is a disappointing one.
There's a bunch of bullshit. I remember when I originally saw about the New Zealand government being a more conservative one coming in, I had a bad feeling about it, and
Yeah.
I hate to see that it's come to fruition.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they used to be so good, didn't they, New Zealand?
Yeah, Jacinda
Under
Ardern and all that.
Yeah.
Although there's probably some bad bits, but that's a whole other part of it. But yeah, it's...
Yeah, I mean, no country's a monolith, and neither is any culture, but there was at least in policy a stronger position than this that was safer than this, and it's the fact that it's also so directly tied to the movement here, and because we have first-hand knowledge of how absolutely egregiously awful that is, it's like...
The hatchet job.
It's seeing the bad apples spoil the bunch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's like
Yeah.
you saw that hatchet job and thought it was good over here. What a bunch of idiots.
That, or they just want the same wood cutting up, regardless of whether the hatchet was wielded with care or not. That sounds dark. Sorry, I don't want to.
It was kind of dark.
I don't want
yes.
to be. I was watching Twin Peaks like the third season just before this, so like, you know, I've been in a strange spacey place.
Well, you added a good metaphor on top, so...
So, and I guess kind of related to this, in the sense that, you know, the UK government doing questionable things, and it will have like a ripple effect, right? Because this is something that's coming in that's we don't know what the effects of this are going to be, and that is, of course, the guidance from the EHRC, which as of yet still hasn't been released. Well, the EHRC are very keen that Bridget Phillips and the Equalities Minister do release it. They've been leaning on her to do that, and now apparently they've taken matters into their own hands. So we'll be amazed if you've not heard about this one. It's been all over the place, thanks to the general Alabama-ness of it all, and it concerns some information allegedly leaked to the nation's second favourite right-wing purveyors of stochastic terrorism, those cheeky scamps at the Times. 2 articles, both written by Geraldine Scott, were published within 5 minutes of each other on November the 19th. One asks, what is the new gender guidance on single-sex spaces and sport, like she's Jerry fucking Seinfeld or something? And the other bluntly lays it out with the headline being, trans people could be banned from single-sex spaces based on how they look. So, a couple of things to say right off the bat. All of this stuff has been based on a document allegedly leaked to the Times. Try as we might, we have not been able to obtain that leaked document for a full comparison, and so it's very, very difficult to properly evaluate from what are essentially fragments of a document that have been shared and, let's say then, interpreted by the Times. Another thing to bear in mind, since the articles came out on the 19th, more than a week ago at time of recording, the EHRC haven't responded to our or anyone else's requests for comment. They've been completely radio silent about it, which is unusual, because when it comes to spouting off gross transphobia, you normally can't get them to shut up.
Now, we don't want to go nuts on the quotes from the guidance, which, according to the Times, runs 300 plus pages, but we do have to provide a few, and I'm going to start with one that I feel is quite illustrative of the thought process behind all this. In one of the 2 articles from the 19th, it talks about how, quote, gender-critical beliefs are cool and awesome, and anyone who holds them is a really brave, special little guy who we must all bow down to and respect the whole huggy-buggy bunch. In making this argument, they have the temerity to say that people shouldn't rely on stereotypes when dealing with gender-critical people. While quoting from the leaked documents, which I'll flag up as we go, they genuinely do phrase it like this. Quote, "One example of such a stereotype is a presumption that people who, quote, hold or manifest certain gender-critical beliefs necessarily have negative attitudes towards trans people," unquote. Another example is presuming that people, quote, who hold or manifest the belief that same-sex sexual activity is sinful necessarily have negative attitudes towards gay people, end quote. Like, what the fuck? Are you serious? Can you fucking hear yourselves right now with this love the sinner, hate the sin horseshit? Oh yeah, your relationship is totally against God, but it's okay, because I don't mean that in a negative way. So that quote about, people who hold or manifest the etc, isn't the Times' wording, by the way. It's apparently a quote from our very own Ministry of Love, the HRC.
And we can't really talk about this story without addressing the big headline news aspect we mentioned earlier, which, if you've heard any part of the news, it'll be this bit. The discrimination of it all. The suggestion that trans people should be excluded, or not, from facilities based on how we look. Now the thing is, we incurred psychic damage and read several Times articles in full several times. At no point is there one specific sentence or quote from the EHRC that comes right out and says this. It is, however, implied quite heavily, like whoever wrote this was definitely thinking it quite loudly. For example, according to the Times, service providers should put some thought into how a trans person will be perceived, whatever space they end up using, and it gives an example of a trans man who, because of his biological sex, is female, will be obliged by this guidance to use women's facilities, but because he, quote, presents as a man and may have been on testosterone and have had top surgery and whatever else, then the other people in the women's changing room, quote, could reasonably object to his presence. Fuck off. The question is the guidance very much not answering is, where then is this person to go?
The guidance also talks about how it will be lawful for people to be asked about their biological sex, although I'll read you how the Times phrased it. The guidance sets out how it would be lawful for a transgender person to be asked about their biological sex in order to preserve single-sex spaces. So have you spotted the problem there? The guidance sets out how it would be lawful for a transgender person to be asked about their biological sex. Sure, fine. But how confident are the EHRC that it'll only be trans people who end up getting asked about their genitals by complete strangers? Definitely no women with short hair or slightly built guys with ponytails getting caught up in this? No. Perish the thought. But putting that aside, even if the person being asked was reliably trans 100% of the time, it is still a really invasive question. What they have done is hand out a weapon to literally anybody who feels like throwing their weight around. Transphobes will absolutely use this, yes, but think about the potential for this to be weaponized against any other person. If you feel like wasting somebody's time by forcing them to locate and present their birth certificate to some business or organization that's been told they're trans.
All in all, if this guidance contains what the Times says it does, and let's be honest, the Times do have a lengthy rap sheet for being, let's say, economical with the truth, but if they are correct and they've received a hefty document from someone in the civil service, then this is bad. Some places will go along with it, but a whole lot of them won't. And as we've spoken about last time with the MPs who sent a letter to the business secretary, going to the toilet as a trans person in the UK will be a total crapshoot. And to translate all of this bureaucratic, jargon, it's essentially, we know it when we see it. We can always tell. That's what it is. So I see this as like this is a response to the notion of, well, how are we going to actually put that into practice? It's down to, like, this is their way of denying self-ID while still trying to resolve that loophole of the immediate nonsensicalness of having people, regardless of the way that they move through the world, put into these single-sex spaces.
Yeah, trying to force legislation in places where it isn't actually legislation.
It's trying to make sure that they have figured out that thing, so that question can't be there anymore. Well, there's still the possibility to obviously see someone, and if they are clearly moving through the world in a certain way, then you don't. But it's doing that without allowing for self-ID, because that is actually the best way to resolve all of this.
One thing I want to draw out of this, though, is specifically about that example of an example of a stereotype where the presumption is people who hold gender-critical beliefs necessarily have negative attitudes towards trans people, which, yes, they fucking do, right? That's what gender-critical is. The whole reason that gender-critical exists as a phrase is because they were wanted to get away from saying TERF or, reactionary transphobe fascists. So for them to say, just saying it right out in the open there, saying, oh, gender critical doesn't mean you hate trans people, when absolutely, yes, it fucking does.
Yeah.
And that second example of, people who hold the belief that same-sex sexual activity is sinful necessarily have negative attitudes towards gay people. Yes, they fucking do!
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god, can you fucking believe these people?
No, exactly.
When reading it, I was like, the fucketh be mine eyes reading? How doth thou come to such a conclusion?
They want to stick up for their anti-trans buddies, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's that. Again, it's this whole thing of people are now allowed to be the gender arbiters over others, but God fucking forbid one of us get a single chance of that same agency. For ourselves, no less, let alone other people.
No, definitely.
Tell me who is forcing their worldview on who when we have this shit happening, and we're the ones that are being told. Under my skin it is.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes, indeed.
I gotta say, the fact that I suppose some people might be thinking, oh, it's the Times, they're probably lying.
The thing is, the Times aren't the ones that have said, people hold or manifest the belief that same-sex sexual attraction is sinful, necessarily have attitudes towards gay people, and the other one about trans people. Those are direct quotes, allegedly from the document. But we'll have to wait until the full document is released, because if it has been gently massaged by everybody's second favourite non-paper, then we'll see, won't we? But I mean, even if they have, I don't expect there will be any consequences. Anyway, right, I think we should move on.
Yes, there's one last thing I wanted to say about this, which is, because obviously it's a 300 plus page document.
Yes.
The only bit they've reported on it is the areas that relate to gender and sex.
Yeah.
So they just received that massive document that is full of information about various protected characteristics, rights, and they've decided to hone in on the moral panic.
You can tell
Give me a break. If you expect me to believe that this is good faith reporting.
Look at that liberal use of Control F. There's going to be some talk of some medical procedures, invasive assessments and everything like that. So if you want to skip this part of the podcast episode, Amber will give you the timestamps. You might remember ages ago, like in 2023, we were promised that there would be a medical trial to investigate the potential risks and benefits of puberty blockers. And now finally a research protocol has been published for the Pathway trial. Pathways, or to give its full name, Puberty Suppression and Transitional Healthcare with Adaptive Youth Services, is an umbrella for several different studies. One of these pathways, Horizon, has previously been covered on the pod. Horizon is the study which is literally just questionnaires, but the new stuff that's been announced, the Pathways Horizon Intensive, more questionnaires plus MRIs, Pathways Trial, one which actually offers blockers and may include MRIs, and Pathways Connect, which is a way of grouping or connecting data of everyone getting those brain scans. It sounds like a shit Xbox Kinect game. Today we're going to focus on the trial.
Yes, so the trial has 5.5 years worth of funding and will offer 2 years worth of puberty blockers to a maximum of 226 young people. If the trial can't find 226 eligible people in time to collect the data it needs, the team will apply for more funding to extend the length of the trial. Now, 226 doesn't feel like very many people. By comparison, the Horizon study, which we've just mentioned, it's the one that just had surveys in it, will have an estimated 3,600 young people participating. That 3,600 might include some double counting, because you can participate in both the trial and Horizon at the same time, but it's still like an order of magnitude difference. Participants in the trial will be screened for their mental health, physical health, and pubertal development. The full inclusion-exclusion criteria was devised in collaboration with the National Multidisciplinary Team, or the NMDT. We'll be hearing lots more about them as we go on, which will independently evaluate the eligibility of all trial candidates on a case-by-case basis. Broadly, it'll only take on board people aged from 11 to 15 years and 11 months, and some conditions like inflammatory bowel disease, cystic fibrosis, severe depression, low bone density, or a high or a low BMI are some of the reasons that a person might be excluded. The 226 who actually get into the trial will be split evenly into 2 groups. One group will have to wait a year to start blockers, and the other group will only have to wait as long as it takes to get all the approvals and baseline tests questionnaires done.
At baseline, there's a couple dozen questionnaires and such to be filled out, including assessments of cognitive development. Plus all the tests like checking bloods, urine, a 12-lead heart monitor, x-rays, a bone density scan, a physical exam, and Tanner stage assessment, which is a pubertal development assessment. And on top of all of that, possibly an MRI. The trial protocol has provision for repeating some tests, including a Tanner stage evaluation, if more than 3 months has elapsed between screening and baseline. So some of these things won't have to be done as many times if the gender clinic is able to work quickly. Here is one of the most concerning things, which Che will talk about in our interview a little later. But this Tanner screening is also done at the end of the trial, which raises some big red flags, as well as no parents or carers being allowed in the room just to chaperone, which is terrifying. Like, on a very serious note here, what this trial is asking these children to be put through is potentially quite intimate exams that may involve touching body parts without a soul they recognise near them. It's like we've moved no further from the era of Wakefield. And those cognitive tests? Well, we've heard about the autism and ADHD assessments, but apparently those questionnaires will only be given to the families. They won't be getting direct information from the children themselves about their experience. You know, the things that are normally essential for assessing the way that someone... experiences things. So that's not great.
Yes, the questionnaires and cognitive assessments done at baseline do have time estimates attached, which we make out to be roughly 3 hours. About as long as watching Avengers Endgame, including all the credits. But instead of watching superheroes fight, you're being asked to question every detail of your life and body, and getting asked to remember numbers and stuff. Thankfully, you don't have to do all the questionnaires at once, but still, it's a lot. Plus, a ton of these tests, questionnaires, and cognitive assessments will have to be repeated at regular intervals throughout the trial's runtime. Some questionnaires might be done as many as 7 to 9 times. Also, we keep mentioning MRIs. About 2/3 of those on the trial, 150 out of the 226, will also be part of the Pathways Connect. So they'll get 3 MRI scans, one as a baseline and the rest after each year on blockers. And Connect will also scan 100 people not on blockers via Horizon Intensive.
Okay, so once on the Pathways trial, regardless of what subgroups you end up being in, you ultimately get blockers for 2 years and a bunch of checks and things at mostly 6-month intervals. After the 2 years of blockers, any ongoing questionnaires slow down to once every 12 months. After the 2-year period, depending on what you want and what the NMDT team approve, you have 3 options. Number 1, continue blockers, which is subject to annual review by the NMDT. Number 2, start other hormones, which also requires NMDT approval but not annually. And 3, stopping blockers and not getting HRT. Obviously, it is totally cool if someone changes their mind about wanting blockers or hormones, and people are free to leave the trial early if they wish. But here at What the Trans, we are a little worried that someone might get left without blockers or HRT, not by their own choice, but by the decree of the NMDT. Similarly, anyone who wants to continue blockers after the trial period probably doesn't want the stress of an annual review thereafter, where their healthcare might be revoked. So, it was quite a lot of information we just threw at you there, wasn't it?
It was, and I'm going to come in with a little extra piece on top, because we've mentioned the NMDT, who obviously have quite a lot of power in this situation. And, well, obviously the NMDT was set up as per recommendation 9 of the CAS review. And it has approved 0 young people for HRT in its first year of operation. Presumably they're going to be actually approving people for the trial and will approve further endocrine care afterwards, especially since the details of ongoing care will be reported as part of the trial. But it's concerning. I would hope that they, in my mind, and this is just me, not being a doctor, just some fool on the internet, it would make sense to begin hitting the ground running and already having some prescriptions so that you know how this newfound service, this newfound body is going to operate in practice before the big trial that's going to determine so much for so many people. So it's concerning to me that I don't want to say they've just been sitting pretty, but they've certainly been taking their time in terms of providing people the medication this whole thing's meant to be about.
It's just horrid. I mean, when I kept hearing about the MRI things, it just screams if we want to see if trans brains are different to normal people's brains and use it as an excuse to take away trans healthcare entirely.
Yeah, I mean, there's like studies and findings and stuff that are come out on pop science websites reasonably frequently saying that trans peoples have the brain activity in scans and so on of their acquired gender rather than their birth gender. But that might be part of it. They might be trying to sort of codify that into actual proper science rather than just pop science, like, put it into an actual trial paper and whatever.
I just wonder where that actually where does that take us? How frequently are trans people getting brain scans to prove whether they're trans or not?
Yeah, very true.
It feels, again, it's like this weirdly, it's in the same way that the problems with having the puberty assessment at the end of the trial, it's concerning because it feels guided by this weird voyeuristic sense of entitlement due to us being so pathologized.
I remember saying in a previous podcast episode it was a shit acronym, and I have to still stand by it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
crap.
agree. It's totally a backronym, isn't it? They've started with a word and thought, right, how can we make a word fit our rubbish, the spec that we're trying to do? How can we make it sound like a word?
It's entirely metaphorical for the whole thing, because it's forcing something where it shouldn't be forced.
It's, as one of the editing ambers might say, a bit clunky. So
yes,
yeah, but I just think it's ironic that they're calling it pathways when they're currently blocking all of the roads.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's but yeah, this is gross. It's gross. It reminds me, as I mentioned, of Wakefield. I hate this shit. I hate this shit.
Agreed. And it's just 226, right, out of presumably a few thousand. Like, and I'm fine maybe thinking that they could try and involve all of the appropriately aged young people in the trial is a bit too much to ask, but it still feels like they could have done a bit more than 226.
Yeah. Again, it's the fact that this has to happen at the cost of that medication being available to anyone else, as if that is a common thing that happens all the time, and it's very much not.
Yes.
Apparently this has been approved by an ethics board to something to me feels entirely unethical in the way they've approached it.
Yeah.
And like the requirements to be allowed to access this care, or in this case, like they're trying to rule out as many people as possible and forcing it's just forcing this ableist sort of bullshit and saying, oh, autistic people can't be trans, and it's just utter evil.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that one of the sort of exclusionary things is high or low BMI, I think it's really...
No, definitely.
It's gross. We can talk about how it's needed for scientific controls, but then we need to talk about the ways in which fat phobia is institutionalized and turned into scientific method, and maybe that is not a good way to do things. And similarly for those who have, much smaller frames, who may equally have whatever metabolism differences or whatever conditions or whatever just natural ways of being that are, according to BMI, not correct. It's forcing people into a quote-unquote normal body.
Yeah, I was going to say the censoring of normal, of what they perceive as normal, which to me, normal is not a normal thing. There's more people outside of our normal than there is normal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I, like, the cynic in me is wondering, I wonder if they're making the study design as kind of onerous as possible with so many different tests and MRIs, not constantly, but, very frequently, and trying to make it as unappealing as possible, so no one's interested in going for it, or like lots of people will drop off the study and they'll have to run it again or discredit the results or whatever. But that's just me being needlessly cynical. So
well, would you like a cure for some cynicism? A little bit of good news for a second?
Ooh, that sounds lovely. Let's do that.
Because this week, Loser's Corner, we have a little mini amuse-bouche, if you will, between meats. But they are bite-sized and quick, so let's get stuck in.
Loser's Corner.
So, firstly, we have a nice simple one in the form of an FOI and find out. Translucent looked into how many people have actually complained about trans people in toilets and found a whopping fuck all. No, really. Here's the summary. Data from the local authorities representing over 16.5 million people reveal complaints about trans women using toilets are virtually non-existent, with 36 councils reporting 0 incidents and only 2 receiving single complaints. And one of the councils with a single complaint was simply in reference to someone being perceived as trans. It could have been anyone.
And next up in legal wins, a trans post office employee has won against her employer in a discrimination suit. She filed due to direct discrimination and harassment due to gender reassignment and sex. And she won, showing that despite the Supreme Court ruling, trans people can very much claim and win in civil cases based on sex. So what was it all for, my dudes? Obviously, the answer is to further control over populations considered deviant, blah, 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 dystopian sociology, blah, blah, blah. But yes, good to know. Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I hope things are doing well for her, because no one deserves that.
Yeah, and also a good middle finger to the HRC. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, pretty much.
As ever. As ever.
I got to say, the thing about the complaints is also quite interesting, because it, like, they make media campaigns, millions of pounds spent into just talking about look at these women having such a bad time with trans women in toilets, and then no one has complained at all. And like, you see not in our name, coming out there with 65,000 cis women coming out in support signing to say, no, trans people are cool. It's really just highlights how much of an inflated AstroTurf movement it really is.
Yeah, because it's not representative, because the councils themselves are like, no, what do you want about?
No, definitely. It reminds me of the translucent. Well, they also did one for NHS hospitals about trans people in the wards, and there was literally no complaints. Maybe like 2 or something in the entirety of the NHS all over the country. So
yeah.
So, want any meat? Maybe we get into some steak about the levy stakeholders. Get it? Get it?
I thought my pathways segue was forced.
No. I'm master comedian. I will be here until the audience is sick of me.
You're fired.
Now, this story is an interview with Che from Transactual. You may remember him as he came on the pod briefly a few episodes ago, as well as last year, to speak about HRT being stopped, their MP campaign, and Transactual's position as one of the groups in the Trans Healthcare Coalition that was being involved in the Adult Services Review headed by Levy, as a stakeholder organisation.
Now, I know all of us are waiting with bated breath to see what they plan to do to us. I mean what they consider to be appropriate care for us. But why bother now, right? Apparently it's all ready to go, they just keep delaying it. We might see GTA 6 before we see the Levy review. Well, there's new info. Big info. If you, like us, are always online, then you might know what I'm getting at here.
So, someone on our team, Christina, has been an FOI fiend and come back with a hit. She asked for a list of stakeholder individuals and organisations involved, and a list of all the organisations and people not listed as stakeholders who are involved in a review. And they came back to us with a working list of all the groups and individuals the Levy Review has engaged with. Genius.
Now, there's a lot of names you'd expect, Stonewall, Transactual, etc., and it's good to see some groups like Black Trans Foundation, Gendered Intelligence, and even Indigo on the list. But when it gets bad, it gets real bad, because not only is CAS on there, rough but to be expected, but there is a group called the Clinical Advisory Network for Sex and Gender that are deeply transphobic. They work with the Tavistock whistleblower and are currently arguing that the Pathways trial is unethical, but not for the reasons we listed earlier, oh no, but it's because they should be exploring purely therapeutic treatments for trans kids instead.
Gross. Also, Dr. Camilla Kingdon is there. Now, this is relevant because she is the independent chair of the NHS Children and Young People's Gender Service National Provider Network for England and chair of a national multidisciplinary team responsible for evaluating whether trans kids can get hormones. Yes, the same multidisciplinary team spoken about in the Pathways segment. That's definitely a great sign of ethical rigour. She's also a friend of Hilary Cass, even writing articles in her defence and with her, going so far as to sign an open letter protesting the BMA's analysis of the Cass review, because of course objectivity is in the eye of the beholder when it comes to the scientific method, and you should be ashamed of yourself if you want peer review. That's for pansies. Levity aside, there is no funny way to bring up the last name that we noticed on the list for people the Levy Review has engaged with. So I'll just rip off the plaster. Bayswater are also on there. Yes, the awful group who have had exposés showing abuse practices within trans children being cheered on have been engaged with for the Adult Gender Services Review. It's one thing to involve someone like Cass or Kingdon, who we have good reason to want nowhere near us but can anticipate considering their fields. But these are internet trolls in fancy fucking fun, egging each other on and traumatizing children. They have no right to be involved in our business. This is why we decided, between the delays and the deeply concerning revelation, to check in with Che again, follow up on some things that he said in the last interview, and ask his opinion on their involvement. And, well, honestly, try and assess how much we might need to brace ourselves. Roll clip.
Hi, I'm Shay Brown. My pronouns are he and him. I'm Transactual's Director for Operations and for Healthcare. and I'm here more on the healthcare side today.
So obviously, some of our listeners may recognise your voice because we've had you on the podcast before. That time primarily to talk about the system that Transsexual had set up for people to be able to report when their HRT had been refused or stopped. We're curious, in the time since, are there any more findings you can share with this, or are there any next steps that have been made since that conversation?
Yeah, I think people letting us know when they've been refused HRT by their GP has been really helpful. So please do keep letting us know when it happens, because we've been able to share the data on that, anonymized obviously, with NHS England, with the Department for Health and Social Care, with Dr. Michael Brady's LGBT Health and Equalities Evidence Review, being able to share it within that sort of provision of evidence as well. And by people speaking up on it, there is movement, just slow movement within NHS England. There is movement, and we're seeing in some integrated care boards they're setting up sort of what's known as like highly specialized services, or no, not highly specialized services. They're setting up locally commissioned services, like GP led services, to support the GPs in their area. There's a long way to go in getting things sorted, because it's not good enough to just sort of say, oh well, we're going to send all the trans people to this one GP in the whole area to get their HRT, but it just means that people have got access to that other type of support in the meantime. But really, there's a training need for GPs and an awareness need, and people are listening. These things take time, but people are listening, and I don't think we're seeing the change just yet that we need to see, but it can take a frustrating amount of time. But it's been heard. It's been heard. It's an issue. It's acknowledged. It's a big issue that needs addressing.
Yeah. So you're able to use that data and show the breadth and depth of the denial of care that's happening in an institutional level, and they're receptive to that.
Yeah, and the fact that it's on, being able to say that it's ongoing, it's not continued to get worse. It's on the same level, I'd say, as it has been for a good year or so now. It's sort of it's more common than it used to be for GPs to refuse access to HRT, but thanks to the information that trans people have been giving us through the reporting tool, and then also through our own research, asking GPs themselves, have you prescribed, and if you've ever refused to prescribe, why was it? That really helps us to understand what needs to change, you know, and understanding that's really important, because if we don't address that, then other things to sort of remedy it in the meantime are just sticking plasters, and we're interested in, yeah, making things less bad now, but thinking long term about how do we prevent these issues in the future.
Just sticking with the last interview just for a minute. In that last interview, you said you were given assurances by NHS England that there was no plan to remove access to HRT or to close gender clinics. You'd had that from them verbally, but not in writing. Have you since received it in a more concrete way?
Actually, the last letter I received from Baroness Mellon, who is, I can't remember her title, but she's in the Department of Health and Social Care. I think she's her title involves secretary of something, but she's a member of the Lord. She's in the Department of Health and Social Care. She's got responsibility for overseeing a range of things. Transition related care is one of them. When responding to a letter I'd written about numerous health related concerns and queries, she did put in writing that there was no intention to make it harder for people to access transition related care, um, or indeed to reduce the number of gender clinics. And what we're really waiting for now is for the Levy review to be published, so that we we know what it is actually recommending, because there's a lot of fear in the community, and there's been a lot of speculation, and the way to sort of hopefully put an end to that fear and speculation is, well, publish the thing, and every time I'm told it's due to come out, weeks pass and it still doesn't come out. So we're in that situation again where I was given every indication it would come out in November, but it's the 27th of November today.
Yeah, it's starting to feel like we're in a very immersive uh, experience for waiting for Godor, but who knows? We'll see. But you've kind of perfectly segued into the next question, because I was about to ask, how are things going with the review of adult services? Obviously, you said you're waiting for publication, but is there much that you know beyond that?
Not really.
Is it safe to say all of the like visits have been done and there's all of the meetings that have been done? Are we at the stage where that's been completed now?
Yeah, there is, as far as I know, the report's been written. The report's been written, and we're waiting for it to be published. And like I said, sort of, I've been told a few times now it's coming very soon. Yeah, a matter of weeks. Um, but that's been hearing that for a while. But yeah, the review for visits to the clinics were all done by the more or less by the end of 2024. Um, as far as I understand it, the write up is all done, so I'm not sure what we're waiting for. So I'm not sure what. Um, Now it's a bit complicated because NHS. In the past, I'd say I'm not sure what NHS England is waiting for, but NHS England, and particularly the part of NHS England responsible for what's called specialised commissioning, which involves a few different types of um, sort of commissioning of care. For like, quite often it's for like very, very rare um, diseases or like really complex things, but then also trans care. Um, as far as I understand it, that service is going to move into Department for Health and Social Care. And between NHS England completely sort of dissolving and things shifting, they're in a bit of an in-between stage. So it's hard to know, should I be saying I don't know what NHS England are waiting for, or should I be saying I don't know what the Department of Health and Social Care are waiting for? It does feel like they're waiting for something. I don't know what. I mean, it's a good job as trans people. We're well used to waiting as a result of actions or inactions of NHS England or the Department of Health and Social Care, really. But waiting we are.
Yeah, well, I feel like your comment there kind of perfectly encapsulates it in and of itself. the review, at least from, you know, the sort of service user experience, to use that language, from the community, to say, well, I don't know if I should say what are the department waiting for, or what are NHS England waiting for, kind of goes to prove the point of how sort of weirdly clandestine some of this has felt, just from the outside perspective.
How engaged with the community then, when the report was still being drafted up, when it was still being written, and not just sitting on somebody's desk for somebody else to say, yes, let's release the thing? How engaged with the community did you feel the review was throughout that process?
It's been nowhere near as engaged as I'd want it to be. You know, again, we had the survey of people that were either under the care of a gender clinic or had been in the last however many years. I think it was 5 years or something. So there was that engagement there, and they did chat to some service users of the clinics when they did their review visits. We've is trans and or LGBTQ plus organisations. Those of us doing this sort of work day in day out. I think we have met with David Levy at all. And there has been some communication, but and we were able to feed into things like suggestions for improving the community survey and things like that. But there's been little info forthcoming since then. I have been in touch with NHS England to say, you know, when the review does come out, please make sure that it's really clear on, you know, your communications are really clear on what this does or doesn't mean for trans people, because if you're really clear in an FAQs or something like that, then that might alleviate some of people's fears, in theory. Because of course we know there's a lot of distrust in the NHS, and we can understand why. So yeah, as always, I've encouraged communication and things. But again, whether that happens um will remain to be seen. For example, with this isn't an NHS England thing, but the research team on the Pathways trial, for example, the first we saw of the protocol was after journalists had already seen it, and it was literally 5 p.m. or 5 past 5 p.m. On a Friday afternoon when
We know this tactic. We've come across this tactic before.
it's community organisations that the people impacted by it are going to turn to, and once they did have, you know, child and young person friendly info, it was quite hard to find, and not all of it didn't answer the questions that people were going to have. So we do have this sort of thing again. That wasn't NHS England; that was the Pathways Study team, but it's very in keeping with communications that we've had or not had from NHS England before. For example, you know, I'm very conscious that a lot of the information on the Levy review and what it means or could mean or what it doesn't mean, a lot of it has come from Transactual, from the Trans Healthcare Coalition, from other community organisations putting that information out. Um, when actually it shouldn't have been us. It should have been NHS England making that information accessible, and answering people's questions rather than, community organisations having to step in and do it.
Yeah. I mean, it to me, it says a lot and it shows a lot about the priorities of some of the actors involved here when those whose response and input on these protocols, on these documents, would be the most valuable and the most unignorable are the people that find out about it last. That is just deeply concerning, and it does not. It's not an act of good faith from my perspective. Well, while we're talking about the engagement and how earnestly you were being heard and listened to, how actionable the advice you were giving, it reminds me of something that was brought up last time. Wasn't it that you had, as in Transaction alongside various other groups, had a meeting with Dr. Levy where you had been able to say, hey, here's some problematic things, here's some ways that we would prefer to do things about that. And I think you mentioned you had been encouraged to follow up on email but hadn't received anything back. Did you ever receive anything back from that? Did you ever get any changes that were made in lieu of your advice and things?
Around the specific meeting, I can't remember. I've slept a few
Yes.
times since then.
Understandable.
However, we were asked for feedback on the community on the survey that they had out. If people remember, sort of around December, January last year, there was a survey out for people who were under the care of a gender clinic in England, or who had been in the past 5 years, and weirdly, their family members, their friends and family members. That was weird, and one of my feedbacks was what with regards to the friends and family members. Why are you taking? Why are you doing that? That's a bit odd. Um, just felt a bit weird. However, apart from that feedback, the other feedback we gave on phrasing of questions, and sort of things like that, most of that feedback did get acted on, which I felt was encouraging. Um, yeah, I felt it was very encouraging. It was just we still had the weird thing that the asking, in a review of adult services, they're asking people's friends and family members, because if it was, it's not because they were doing it for an accessibility reason. Because if someone needed support from a friend or family member to respond to the survey, they can do it on the survey for service users or former service users. They don't need to do it on a separate survey, because they should be asking, what did you think? What did you feel? Rather than sticking their oar in, basically.
I, I struggle to think of any other area of healthcare where you would go about aggregating that kind of data that way, because normally if you're looking at adults receiving medical care, we don't tend to focus on all of the people around that who do not have any of those symptoms who would be impacted. So it's interesting.
No, for example, no one asks, no one's ever asked my dad what he thinks of
Yeah.
what sort of care's my GP giving me.
Yeah, how does someone else's transness affect you before we make any decisions about what they get to access and how they get to live is a very, very strange position to put anyone in, both the trans person and the family and friends, because it's like, well, now those people are being put in a weird position of you are the arbiter of someone else's healthcare. And that's so much. When that person is a fully functional adult that's corpus mentis,
And I know that some people might take a friend or a family member into appointments with them, but again, it's not in the majority of cases, I'd say, for adults. And again, if it's because they need support with understanding, the same person can support them with understanding the questions on the survey for service users. Anyway, that was a bit weird. That got kept in for whatever reason. But yeah, like I did think that, feedback has been taken on board here and there. But yeah, like I said, it's the sort of the feedback on keeping the community updated between, in the interim period between, right, people have responded to the survey, the review visits have been done, and then, what communication has there been to the community about, even things like beyond the basics of what the review is, there's still over a year, about a year on, what has there been? There's not been much communication at all.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess moving on to the nitty gritty of the adult services review. Do you feel that they are like only listening to some voices, like are things being excluded? Do you think they might be cherry picking the advice that they want to follow, rather than engaging all aspects of the community in good faith?
I think the review is in good faith, but I just think a couple of aspects of it are a bit. I'm trying to think of the words. A bit non-issues, perhaps, or less important. Sort of looking at the framing of the surveys and things like that, and questions about detransition. But then on the other hand, some people detransition, and it's important that everyone should have access to healthcare that meets their needs. So it's just because people are in a tiny minority within a minority group doesn't mean they shouldn't have their views heard as well. But yeah, on the whole, I'm hopeful, and that trans people will have been listened to, and that clinicians will have been listened to, about what they're saying, about what the service needs, and I don't know. At this stage, it would be hard for the report to say that transition related care for trans people in England is good enough, because it's not. And because we've seen the data that has been put together, by folk looking into, like the massive difference in, even how many patients get seen per month by one clinic compared to the other. When you look at it on a per member of staff, like per full-time member of staff, the massive disparities, like that won't have gone unnoticed. Um, and I think the inefficiencies within, it sounds very like corporate, but the inefficiencies within the system won't have gone unnoticed, and hopefully the right questions have been asked of the right people. Um, yeah, and I've not recently, I've not recently heard anything that's worrying me about the review. I'd say nothing massive, nothing massive.
Well,
Well,
I think we have.
Yeah, so here is actually one of the more. This is one of the things that has given me the most cause for concern, actually, in the review. We have, in the last few days, so the FRI request that was put through by a member of our team, Christina, came back stating that both the Bayswater Group and the Clinical Advisory Network on Sex and Gender were both in the list of organisations, the working list of organisations and individuals with whom the Levy team has, well, the review team has engaged with. So curious on what your thoughts, feelings, understandings are of that. If you're aware at all, feel free to say anything. sorry for you to be like, I've not heard anything too troubling, and then we're like, hey, so this, but we kind of have to ask for if you knew about that at all, or if there's anything that you can maybe give reassurances on in either direction, whatever your thoughts are.
Can SG, I'd seen an FOI that listed them. I'd seen an FOI that listed, I'm not saying she's associated with Can SG or Bayswater for legal reasons, but I'd seen Hilary Cass had had some sort of involvement. I hadn't seen about Bayswater and was pleasantly surprised. In that, asking Bayswater and Can SG about good practice in transition related care for adults. Sorry for people that have heard me say this a million times, but it's like getting anti-vaxxers to feed back on the national vaccination strategy. Do you know what I mean? It's you just wouldn't. Um, so that's a strange move, but I talk to lots of people. It doesn't mean I listen to them all. So the before we get too worried, could think of it that way. Well, I'd say they absolutely could have had an influence. However, we don't know. We don't know until it's published whether they have or not.
Okay, so going stepping away from the review for a moment then. A year on from your request alongside others, has the review ensured patient representation on the teams that were involved in the review?
We know that there were some trans members of gender clinic staff involved in some of the review teams. They didn't have specific reserved spots for trans people on the review teams. It was more about who put themselves forward and whether that sort of gender clinic that they were working for was happy for them to be the person put forward from their clinic. So there were trans people involved in the review teams, not by design, if you see what I mean. So kind of where it was, well, trans people can be involved as part of the review team, but we've not allocated any specific spaces. So that was what happened. So no, they didn't make specific spaces for trans people on the teams. It was more them taking taking the spaces as as members of staff working within gender clinics. But I know that a lot of the visits had trans, whether they're peer supporters, whether they're clinicians. They did have trans people involved in the visits. It wasn't entirely cis people going. In most cases, that's my understanding.
So the trans people that were involved were primarily those who would have likely been involved anyway because of their clinical position and their job, as opposed to
Yes.
as a community member, a service user with lived experience. Okay.
Precisely.
Okay, understandable. So with all the things that have changed in the last year since when we spoke initially, when the review was underway, but still very much in the process, the blocker ban was a conversation that was very big and is now rearing up again as the adult reviews, the pathways trial comes up and everything. You mentioned that you felt the puberty blocker ban had been coming from from the previous government, and was kind of a vestigial thing from that. I'm curious, how do you feel now about this government's actions towards trans people, now that they've been in the driving seat for a good portion of time?
Disgusted by that. They had an opportunity to they've been in for more than a year. they've had opportunities to make life better for trans people in what we've seen as life get harder and harder and harder. And it's the sort of the double standards in there. So there's things, like for example, that this government have it made the permanent ban, no, the temporary ban on blockers permanent, um, because of worries about safety, um, and claims that there isn't enough longitudinal data on the risks around puberty blockers that have been used. The first academic research paper into the use of puberty blockers on trans people or for trans people was in 1989. When in contrast, if you read the NHS 10-year plan, there's multiple mentions of rolling out weight loss injections, and it's something that the Secretary of State for Health sort of seems quite keen on. He keeps talking about weight loss injections, which the long-term risks for weight loss injections are unknown. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't have access to these medications. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying they should be banned, but it just highlights a double standard that weight loss injections are so new. The longest longitudinal study there is on them is what, 4 or 5 years long. And all the time they're finding, sort of the common thing that's being found at the moment is people having liver problems as a result of weight loss injections. And some people might decide that risk is worth it for them, and that's a decision for them to make. But we don't know what the risks, what the impacts are 10 years down the line. Whereas for puberty blockers, we do know, and yet the government has made it illegal to access them apart from through a coercive and abusive clinical trial.
Fully agree on that. I mean, like the interesting thing to me is always when you get this clear double standard of one new, very very new, that's pushed as the cutting edge of science is being put forward and forward and forward. Meanwhile, this other that has over 10 times the amount of like history and longitudinal studies, that may not be a direct exact quote, but you get my gist. My first question is why? What is it about this thing that you find more valuable, and what is it about this thing that you find dangerous? That's just me rambling anyway. Thank you so much for coming on and doing all of this. I have one question, because the one thing that is a frame that keeps coming through for me, the more I'm hearing about where you're being listened to, where you aren't being listened to, some of the things that are happening. Because I'm now questioning myself, I feel it's only fair to ask you, what do we think about the possibility of there being malicious compliance at play here? Having meetings with people so that you can appear to be doing more than what you actually are doing. I know that there's some element of reading intent in there, which is speculative, but I feel like it's something that's going to be on a fair few people's lips. So I kind of want to give you an opportunity to speak on that.
I'm the sort of person, I think we discussed this when I was on about a year ago. Actually, when we were talking about the meeting with Wes Streeting, not intentionally rhyming that, but and what came out of that, and I said then that, look, I listen to the words that people are telling me, but I look more for them backing those words up with action. When it comes for the Department of Health and Social Care, I'm not seeing a huge amount of action that's supporting trans people. They have announced that, there's what's it called? They're going to be piloting mental health support for people on the waiting list in the southwest of England, but I've not heard much information since then. And when I asked NHS England for details on it, they didn't know because it wasn't their initiative, which is an unusual one. And sort of in the same speech that Wes Streeting announced that trial, he also said that trans women shouldn't stay on women's hospital wards. But he didn't mind about trans men. He was all right about trans men. Just to clarify, the NHS England policy hasn't changed, so we should still be accommodated according to our gender, or for non-binary people, the one that feels least uncomfortable. Um, but yeah, hearing that, knowing, he's talking about our mental health, knowing how many people I've heard about this year going into hospital with their mental health and being put on the wrong hospital ward. Um, so I'm not sure the listening is happening from the Department of Health and Social Care. I I always like to be proved wrong, so I'd invite them to prove me wrong. Um, Whereas there has been more listening from NHS England. However, only on certain things. I've mentioned sort of already, the repeated requests to talk, to communicate with the community. Um, and again, they're welcome to prove me wrong and start communicating in the way that we as a community need them to, and to start building up the trust. But there have been some conversations that I can't really go into now, that there appears to have been some listening, you know. Um, so yeah, but ultimately, these people in with power over our lives have got to understand that we've got very good reasons to not take people on surface value, and not trust, because we've seen how much our lives have got worse in the past year and beyond that. And we've been we've had promises made to us before, you know, and been let down.
Exactly. It's a bit once, twice shy situation. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. But thank you so much for coming on and giving us all of the information and all of your perspectives. I'm sure it will have been really helpful for so many people in the audience. And obviously, welcome back anytime there's anything going on. I guess, is there anything else that you kind of want to bring up, or anything you kind of want to encourage people to go look at or be engaged with, just so that we aren't leaving it on a sour note?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. If you're wanting to know more about the Pathways study and what it means in plain English, have a look on Transactural's website. Just go to the transactual.org.uk and you'll find the info on there, that we did, because others didn't, that should have done it. So we stepped up and did that. And then, in terms of things being listened to, the people writing to their MPs about the EHRC code of conduct and the need for it to be ripped up and started again in terms of the amendments that were made, or just ripped up actually. In terms of the amendments that were made to the code of conduct, if you've not written to your MP, Transactual have got, look on our social media. Transactual have got a template letter that you can send to your MP, um, to write, to ask them basically to write to Bridget Phillipson and tell her to send it back, and asking your MP that if it did go, um, to any sort of vote in the House of Commons to vote to reject it. But definitely it's not been laid before Parliament yet. Bridget Phillipson's clearly she's not confident in it if she's not published it yet. She kind of said so in the her statement to the judicial review. Um, so that is an area of hope in some ways because it's not gone through yet.
That interview was a lot. It was very there were some bits that were actually more reassuring than I first anticipated. It's good to see that there have been some things that have been listened to. Che genuinely feels as though the review has been done in good faith, although some of the other stuff. So, I want to trust him on that.
Yes.
But I also think, I don't know, there's a lot of things that also really concern me.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to rip off the bandage here.
Go for it.
What he said about Bayswater, basically saying, "Oh well,
yeah,
they've got to talk to everybody. They've got to talk to all sorts of different stakeholder organisations." Like, okay, fine, I understand the logic of what he says, but like, I don't think Bayswater should be a stakeholder organisation for an adult review.
No.
Or for any review, really, but certainly not an adult review either. Why are they there? Why are they on that list?
Exactly. It is deeply concerning to me. And that's the thing. If you are allowing, because I understand the argument of, well, I speak to many people that I don't agree with. That doesn't mean that I'm going to take on what they say. But then if they're inviting people like that, if they're engaging with people like that, then how do you know that they're engaging with you in good faith? How do you know that you're not the one that's being told what you want to hear and that they're also being told what they want to hear? Now, obviously, if Che is still able to have that faith, then I want to believe that there is simply more out there that is not stuff that we can publicly know. Yeah. That gives him that extra faith.
Yes, I just want to add on to that because I think one quote I did remember when I did have a brief listen through my lunch break was he said that he was assured that they weren't going to be taking away care or closing down gender clinics. I remember speaking to, back in the Cass Review days, I remember speaking to trans allies inside of Tavistock Clinic, where they told me they were reassured the same thing, but then a couple years, and then once the review happened, they closed down Tavistock, and care has been poured from trans young people.
That's my concern, because you may have received it in writing that there is no intent, but that just means that they're confirming that they aren't deliberately, maliciously doing it in this bloodthirsty sense. I don't know if that's the same thing as, no, we can guarantee those are not results we are considering from this trial or from this review. Sorry, not this trial. I really don't want the statements of like feeling elements of this are still operating in good faith to be famous last words. I really don't. I really want this to be, nowhere near what Cass was. I want our fears to be just fears and not be pattern recognition, right? But also, the pattern's really thick and strong right now. So, it's really, really difficult. And, to me, if Bayswater are involved, all bets are off for me personally, in my opinions of it.
No, I'm right with you. I am all right with you.
And
however,
the lack of things changing, the lack of being, some things were followed up on, but not a lot of the bigger things were followed up on. Not having trans people involved in the patient, in as like service users in a lot of these reviews is a concern to me. I'm concerned about malicious compliance. I've said that before. I'll say it again. We won't know until we see it. We aren't allowed to see it until they publish it. Once they publish it is whenever I guess it's most convenient for them to publish it. Whatever it is that is them taking their sweet time. We can theorize and speculate on it, but that was all it would be. It would be a speculation. But yeah.
Yeah, more on this to
Yeah,
come
it's
when it inevitably drops like on a Friday right before Christmas, so no one will cover it.
I think with all of that, we need a bit of a pick-me-up. So I suppose we better jump onto Trans Joy.
Let's do some Trans Joy. Yes, perfect timing.
I have
All right.
a little tiny bit of trans joy to share myself. I have been able to start back on tea again.
Woo!
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I had
Good,
to stop it for
I'm
a little
glad.
while to figure out some other stuff, and now I figured out that other stuff. Well, when I say I had to stop it for a while to figure out some other stuff, I had to stop it for a while so the doctors would take another issue that I had seriously because I knew they would weaponize it. But now that's figured out. So, trans broken arm syndrome dodged. I'm back on tea.
Nice.
Yeah, actually, I think I had
Good.
some time off of estrogen early for the past couple of months while I did my house move because I don't know why. I think I was trying to figure shit out, but I've done some estrogen recently as well.
You're trying to gain back that biological advantage that testosterone gives.
Oh, with all the lifting of a
Do
fridge.
all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
A Trans Joy for me is that now, many, many years later, I've started watching Sense8. I've watched the first 2 episodes, so
Okay.
don't
I won't say anything.
hit me with your theories just quite
I
yet.
Oh,
but
is it that one? I haven't seen that
like
yet.
I've watched the.
It's so good.
Oh, honestly, I've watched the first 2 episodes and I am obsessed with it, and I keep trying to like not look at the wiki, and like I just want to watch the next episode, but it's only me and Nadia watching it. Lexi watched the first episode and said she wasn't that interested in it, which I was amazed by because like, oh my god, it's so good right from the start. Anyway, yeah, fun times. So I've been loving that. So if you haven't checked out Sense8,
Yeah.
it's really good and it is super fucking queer.
Oh.
I second it. It's done by Lily
Wachowskis.
Wachowski, and it's good. Don't get me wrong. It's it has little moments, but like they're gonna ask you to be sympathetic to a cop because he's one of the characters. That's a little bit
Yeah.
rough. But other than that, it's beautiful. It's lovely.
The first series is actually done by both Wachowskis. It was the
Ooh.
second series where one of them left. Yeah. Anyway, right, Trans Joy. Chaos Cryptid says, Disabled Trans Joy. I am out trying custom wheelchairs next week and I'm so excited to be able to move freely. And good.
Yeah.
I understand the feeling and stick with it, and I hope you get a good one.
So Kai Lewin says, this Trans Day of Remembrance, I went to a vigil at an interfaith church. I volunteered to read the names for December 24th and to share my story with the congregants despite my social anxiety. The pastor was a trans man, and I'm glad I went. It helped them heal from personal experiences.
Nice. So next up is Russ6655. It's been a rough one for me this month, but watching the Minecraft server talk has genuinely made me smile. Even though I don't play, seeing everyone building together, sharing tips, trading stuff, it's just nice. Kind of feels like a little metaphor for the trans community at its best too. Either way, it gives me joy. And honestly, it's been so good. I think we've accidentally turned it into a gigantic communist commune with the amount we've been sharing
Good.
stuff out. It's a vibe.
Beautiful. I mean, if your Minecraft server is not a communist utopia, then
Yeah, what are you even doing?
what
right?
are we building towards?
Yeah.
George says, I spoke to a surgeon last week and I'll be able to get top surgery as soon as February next year. I've got another consultation on the 15th of December where I'll be able to get a date. Congratulations, George.
Congratulations.
And just real quick, Socks says 3 years on tea tomorrow. Fantastic.
Charlotte says, I got dogpiled on Twitter by TERFs, and my euphoria after being told that I looked like Peter Steele, presumably as an insult, has been a really big milestone in my transition. And you know what? I love that. Kill 'em with kindness. Alchemize that hate into love. It's magical.
Oh,
magical.
definitely. Nesta, I've passed on my old breast forms, which I have surpassed in size in the first 6 months of E, to a newly hatched trans girl to help her in her own journey of realizing and understanding herself. Feels really symbolic passing torch moment.
I passed mine on when I finally got to the point where, because I had some big ones, which I passed on to like a clothing swap thing, and then I was using some smaller ones, and I outgrew those as well. Sometime later, it's like, yeah, progress. I love to see it.
Unfortunately won't be able to pass mine on, but that's because when they're taken off, they will be a biohazard.
Yep, sadly.
I remember seeing, at the Trans History Museum thing. I remember seeing those in a jar, and I was like, that's such a mood to put in a museum.
Honestly, if a doctor would let me taxidermy them, I would. I would.
Yeah.
I'd let it be a little display piece at Halloween. It's bodily autonomy to the max. Let me.
Yeah. Let me keep my boobs. Okay.
Just not the way that you want me to keep my boobs, but let me keep my boobs.
In a jar. So Ashleigh says, I have my first surgery referral appointment today. Congratulations. So that's today, as in the day we're recording this. That will, by the time this episode comes out, that will have been a few days ago. But yeah, fantastic. It's a good milestone.
Congratulations.
Love that. Lana says, my GRC was approved on Tuesday. It will take 20 working days, so 23rd of December, more likely January 26th, to arrive. I'm now, quote unquote, officially a woman. Congratulations.
You failed the gender test.
Congrats. Yeah, you did it.
Yes, so next up is Tony Widmo. I witnessed a friend's egg crack yesterday in an online call. I was the first person she told.
Love that. Love that.
My trans joy of late has been seeing the facial changes HRT has had on me. Just past 11 months, comparing my pre and now photos is astounding. Looking in the mirror and seeing a confident woman looking back at me is fire emoji.
Amazing. Mimi says, less of a personal one, but I've just applied to help wrap presents for Trans Secret Santa, and honestly, we need more initiatives like that because it's so lovely, and that is gorgeous. I love that. I always do a little found family festive thing on the solstice, and yeah, Trans Christmas often looks different, and I love that there is this initiative out there. I'm just so happy that this exists. If there is one near you, look up. First of all, look up if there is one near you, and then maybe see if you can volunteer or donate something if you can. If you can't, it's tough for us all, but just saying.
Yeah. And finally, Kira Skuro says, my band are playing our first gig on Sunday, opening day 3 of a goth festival in a cemetery. Who's that further up the bill, I hear you ask? It's only Saint fucking Lucifer. I know, right? No pressure. Wish us luck. And the band is apparently called Verdant Rupture, which is gothic as fuck.
Yeah.
I love it. So, yeah.
Verdant Rupture?
Verdant Rupture.
Verdant's my favourite
I just
word.
love the look on Flint there. It was the most joyful thing.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite words. I don't know, it's just a word that tickles me, and it's obviously it's all relates to greenery and lusciousness, and so it's nice. There's this song by one of my it's a band that I've listened to all of my life called XTC. They did a song called Season Cycle. The first time I remember hearing the word verdant, oh my god, this is so deeply autistic coded, but the first time I heard my favorite word verdant is in a lyric in that song where he says, where are we going in this verdant spiral?
So congratulations, Kira Skuro, for getting on a bill with the legendary Saint Lucifer.
Yes.
Give my regards to them. They'll be looking out for you. I've briefed them, so that'll be fun for you. And hope the gig goes well. And I hope you have a long musical career ahead of you. That's it for Trans Joy.
Woo.
Thanks everybody who submitted. We try and read out as many of them as we can. It's not always possible for one reason and another, but blah, blah, blah. So, thanks very much for tuning in. Yes?
Yes.
End
no,
off. Basically end off show, even though we've got 2 other bits to do first.
You can go home now, we're done.
I just want to listen to our Patreon names. And our names.
And our names, yes, quite. Thanks for listening. And if you enjoy the work we do, you can obviously check us out on the social medias. We're on Blue Sky, we're on Reddit, we're on Instagram, of course. A lot of the visual work and the short form video content we've started to get into goes up on Instagram. Do check that out. And if you feel like this puddle of nonsense is worth donating to, then of course we have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, which we will link in the description below as well. So thank you very much. We'll speak to you in 2 weeks, and look after yourselves.
This episode of What the Trans is written and produced by Sammy, Flint, Ashleigh and Alyx, and presented by Flint, Ashleigh and Alyx. It was edited by Amber Roberts, with our opening music created by Ritzara Yui Carlsberg, and our episode thumbnail was Carlberg. Our episode thumbnail was created by Boa Piers. We would especially like to thank our producer level patrons, who are Alexandra Lilly,
Andrea Brooks,
Anubis a Jackal,
April Heller,
Ariadne Pena,
Ashleigh,
B Squared,
Becky Cheadle,
B,
Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean,
Bernice Roust,
Bex the Mermaid,
Brandon Craig,
Break the System,
Carly Silvers,
Cassius Adair,
Kellen York,
Claire Scott,
Clara Volume,
Crazy Richard,
Cinder Goza,
Danielle Hardwick,
Dan Oblivion,
D,
Dr. McGee,
Dulcie,
Elizabeth Anderson,
L. Gray,
Ellen Meller,
Eric Whitman,
Erin Carlson,
Eris,
Fiona Punchard,
Flaming Daphne,
Flute Punk, Hi Darling,
Gauze Star,
Jen,
George Simmons,
Georgia Holden Burnett,
Grabberlicious,
Gray,
Hazel Dust,
Heather Patterson.
Heidi Reardon,
Helen _
I'm a fawn, you dork.
Jack Edwards,
Jane,
Jem Hoskins,
John,
Jordan Starr,
Kai Lewin,
Karakan 12,
Katie Cox,
Katie Reynolds,
Kiki T,
Lara Bailey,
Laura, Queen of Seagulls,
Lauren O'Nions,
Lee Downs,
Lentil,
Levi Hart,
Lex Phoenix,
Lanus,
Melissa Brooks,
Melissa Harker,
Melody Nix,
Mikhail Jajor,
Mika,
Monsieur Squirrel,
Murgatroyd,
Mux Afon,
Maestrom,
Now Art,
Needles and Threads,
Nick Ross,
Ontologically Unjust,
Orion Matrix,
Oshin,
Patreon User,
Rebecca Prentice,
Roberto DePrunk,
Root -1,
Rose Absolute,
Sap,
Sabrina Artis,
Sabrina McVeigh,
Samantha Raven,
Sarah,
Sarah,
Zetcab,
Sean Phillips,
Cena,
Siobhan Fergus Evans,
Sky Killane,
Sophie Lewis,
Stella,
Susan K. Quinn,
Tabitha Joe Cox, aka Candy,
Tanya B,
Ted Delphus,
The Socialist Party of Great Britain 1904,
The Splund,
Tig Slater.
Tin Roof,
Toby,
Transition begins with I am. The rest comes later.
Trowan,
Undead Nartha,
Vic Kelly
Vic Parsons,
Willow Tree,
and Zoe B. Thank you to you all.